Okay, so a bit of a backstory here. I'm 19 now, but was around 4 or 5 at the time this happened. My parents used to be nudists when I was small, and would encourage me and my brother, 7 or 8 at the time, to accept our bodies, and not to be afraid to show the skin we were born in. They informed me that a lot of their reason for being nudists was because of a very manipulative and persuasive friend that they used to have, who was also into the practice. They are now extremely embarrassed about their period as nudists and try to hide the matter from a lot of friends and family. Well, anyway, my dad and my mother both worked a pretty stable job in an online accounting firm back then, so we went on holidays quite often. I used to love going to Spain the most, so we chose to go to Spain that summer. On our 10-day trip there, before we headed off to the US for a weekend, we enjoyed going to the beach almost every day. Of course, at the time my parents loved nudist beaches, not only for people like them, but also to get a perfect, lineless tan. So, we were on the beach, and my dad and brother was splashing around on the shore, while my mother and I were on some sun chairs, her sleeping and me burying my legs in some sand. I didn't really have anything growing on me back then, so nobody paid much attention to me. They did like to, however, look at my mother occasionally though. We then moved our chairs back to a more secluded part of the beach where there were less people. She fell back asleep, and next to us were a couple, with 2 kids playing behind their chairs, which I thought were their kids. The woman looked at me as I reburied my little legs in the sand and pointed at me, whispering something to the man. She stood up and hung a towel from the sun umbrella above them. The man reached into a duffel bag next to him and got out some sunscreen. He then started to rub it on a sausage-like thing between his legs vigorously. He was staring intently at me, and even 14 years later, I remember that odd look of determination but pleasure on his face. He passed the sunscreen to his wife/girlfriend, and she slipped some in between her legs as well. Even in that age, and my parents being nudists, I felt an instinct that it was not right for them to be staring at me and touching themselves like that. I tried to ignore them and look away, but when I looked back, they were still staring at me. The woman's look was a little softer than the man's. It still really thoroughly creeped me out. What happened next is one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me, and that is saying a lot compared to the other things that have happened to me. The next minute, the woman stopped touching herself and got up. She wiped her hands and area and reached for me, grabbing my arms and shushing me, trying to pull me out of the sand I was buried in. The sand was giving away quickly, and I screamed for my mother. She says I kept going, "Mummy, help! Mummy, help!" I don't remember. It was all in a blur to me now, as my mom got up and yelled, "¿Qué está haciendo?" Means, "What are you doing?" at the woman. My mom said the woman quickly let go of me and, not in Spanish, but in a northern English accent, which she must have guessed because of the English tinge in my mother's Spanish, explained to her that I'd buried myself deep in the sand, up to my nose, and she thought I was gonna slip under, so she simply pulled me out of concern. The sand underneath me was wet, and from my hips upwards I had not a spot of sand stuck to me whatsoever, so my mom knew she was lying. "Your daughter is really pretty. We meant no harm," the man said, unaware he was still rubbing his nether regions. At that point, my mother loses it. "What the f did you just say? And what are you doing to yourself, you disgusting old twat?" The man realized and removed his hand from his inner thigh. "Just sun cream. Keep the old sun from burning me. Just rubbing it in. Do you like hip-hop?" is what I said. My mother had reminded him that his wife had draped a towel that was blocking all sun, and he blushed profusely. She spat in the woman's face, got my hand and dragged me away quickly. We got to my brother and dad, and she told my dad what happened. He stormed over to the lifeguard and explained to him very shortly the situation. Then him and the lifeguard went over to where our stuff was. The couple had taken off, and all that was left were their seats and the 2 kids. My mother scoured through our beach bag for her cell phone to call the local police station, but her phone was missing. and so was my dad's wallet. The lifeguard radioed into the beach kiosk to call the police and to play on the speakers placed on the bars that there were 2 kids, unaccompanied, and their parents need to come collect them. In about a minute or so, a woman came running, tears in her eyes, and scooped up the 2 kids. They must have been around 2 years old, and she held them, crying her eyes out. She thanked the lifeguard and my parents and told us that her husband had fallen asleep, and we told him that the couple must have taken them and moved them to their spot. She had her cell phone in her hand and said she was just about to call the police. My mom told her to, and the lifeguard offered to drive us all the way to the station, including the woman and her husband, as his shift was about to end. We all changed and drove down. In the end, my parents and the nice couple gave their statements. 2 days later, that creeper couple was caught in a hotel offering kids around a pool sprites that had apparently been drugged. They admitted to being, quote, child fetishists, which is basically a more complicated word for nasty pedophiles, and were arrested for many charges like child abduction. And yes, they were found with a kid in their hotel room, attempted kidnapping, child molestation, trespassing, amongst many others. My dad says that they were deported back to somewhere near Bradford, but ran away before court was due. Okay, so this happened in Maine, when I was about 3 years old, almost turning 4. I was at the beach with my mother. We went as a group with some other stay-at-home mothers and their kids. It was a fairly hot and crowded day there, and I found myself playing with the other kids at the edge of the water. For some reason, I strayed away a bit, and that's when a middle-aged woman started talking to me. I remember her very clearly. She sounded like a mother would, with a one-piece black bathing suit, cargo shorts, sunglasses, and her hair pulled up like in a bun. She asked me what games I liked to play, and what my favorite candy was. As soon as I told her, I believe I said Tootsie Pops. She told me she had some in her car, and persuaded me to come with her. Yes, I know I was quite the naive child. She was cheerful and enthusiastic, taking my hand and leading me away through the crowded beach. I skipped alongside her and had no fear whatsoever. Then, thank my lucky stars, my mom spotted me from a distance and started screaming my name at the top of her lungs, jumping up and down while waving her arms. The woman immediately let go of my hand and darted away, and I just stood there, terribly confused, until my mother got to me. I still get chills thinking about it now. She seemed so nice at the time, though I admit I was way too trusting. It stinks of an attempted kidnapping now. If my mother hadn't had spotted me, who knows where I would be, or if I would still be alive. My friends and I recently graduated from high school, and to celebrate, my friend Josephine invited me and 4 others over to her grandmother's beach house for a few days. It was late when we first arrived. For context, mostly everyone in the group was a 17/18-year-old girl. I'm pre-HRT and I couldn't wear a binder for over the 6-hour car trip, so I was kind of feminine from a silhouette standpoint too. The sun had already set, but we wanted to go to the ocean to see the crabs and stuff. 4 out of 6 of us had flashlights, so we were pretty good lighting wise. Also, we felt alright because even though it was around 11 o'clock, we were in a pretty big group. So we're just casually making our way down the shore, when to our left we see a group, maybe 7 or 8 people, coming towards us. They were moving really slowly, and because they all had flashlights, we could see they were all guys. They just stop at the shore, and since we're alright, traveling right away from them, we keep going in that direction. I was always a cautious one, so I keep my eye on them as we walk, and I got a little concerned because every time I turned around to glance at them, more of their once-lit flashlights would go out. And before long, all of their lights were out, which I thought was weird, and that's when they all start following us. I can only assume at this point that they were up to no good, I mean, we're all alone and these guys are following us in the pitch black, and they turned off all the flashlights. I start to voice my concerns, and Kayla, one of the girls there, says thanks, and starts to form a plan, which we know we don't have long to do. Thankfully, we don't have to do anything drastic because we see a family up ahead. We walk right up to them without saying a word, and just stand there, and Kayla says, we'll wait here until they pass us. The guys do pass us, very slowly though, watching us. And right when they're right out of our range of our flashlights, they stop and just wait. Like, what the hell? My friend Kayla nonchalantly pulls us together and whispers, we're going back, and if they start following us again, just run. I thought that was a pretty good idea because there was nobody to go to if we went back to our left. Kayla kind of forbid us from shining the flashlights back at those guys because she didn't want us giving them the wrong impression. So I really have no idea if they followed us back. I'm just glad we all got back safely. I've experienced worse in my past, like kidnappers, friends turned molesters, and etc. But the story I'm sharing here was recent, almost a day old, and it's the most threatened I've felt in a while.